In the quiet town of Willow Creek, where the streets were lined with old brick houses and the scent of fresh bread from the local bakery filled the air, life moved at a peaceful, predictable pace. Children played in the park, shopkeepers greeted familiar faces, and families gathered in their warm homes as the sun dipped below the horizon. But in the midst of this cozy town, there was one soul who didn't belong anywhere, a stray dog with matted fur, hollow ribs, and eyes filled with silent longing. Nobody knew where he had come from. Some said he had once belonged to an old man who had moved away. Most people ignored him, a few pitied him, but no one stopped for him. No one, except a little girl named Emma. And so, on one fateful afternoon, as she walked home from school clutching her lunchbox, she saw the stray dog sitting alone near a lamppost. She knelt down, unwrapped her peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and did something that would change both their lives forever. The town of Willow Creek was peaceful in the golden glow of the late afternoon sun. The streets were lined with little shops, the air filled with the sweet scent of fresh bread from the bakery. Children laughed as they ran across the park, and families strolled home after a long day. Among them was a little girl named Emma, holding her lunchbox tightly as she walked home from school. Emma was 7 years old, with bright hazel eyes and chestnut brown curls that bounced as she skipped along the sidewalk. She loved animals, always stopping to watch birds flutter by or to pet the neighbor's cat. But today, something different caught her attention. Near a lamppost at the corner of the street, a stray dog sat quietly. His fur was dirty and tangled, his ribs faintly visible beneath his thin coat. His eyes, filled with sadness, scanned the passing crowd, but no one stopped. Emma's heart ached. She had never seen him before. The way he sat there, so still and quiet, as if he had given up on the world, made her chest tighten. She slowed down and knelt a few feet away, careful not to startle him. "Hey there," she whispered. The dog lifted his head slightly, his ears perking up. His nose twitched at the scent coming from her lunchbox. Emma glanced down at her peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the one she had saved for later. Without hesitation, she tore it in half and placed one piece on the ground, gently pushing it toward him. The dog sniffed it cautiously before devouring it in seconds. Emma giggled. "You were really hungry, huh?" She offered him the other half. And this time, he didn't hesitate. As he finished, he lifted his head and gazed at her with grateful eyes. Then, to her surprise, he shuffled closer and rested his head on her knee. Emma's heart melted. She stroked his fur gently, feeling the rough texture beneath her fingers. "I wonder if you have a name," she mused. After a moment, she smiled. "How about Lucky? You need a little bit of luck." Lucky let out a small whimper. As if agreeing, Emma grinned, happy with her new friend. Just then, a familiar voice called her name. "Emma, where have you been?" Emma turned to see her mother standing at the end of the sidewalk. Her arms crossed. Her expression was one of concern. But Emma knew that tone. It meant she was in trouble. She quickly stood up. "Mama, I was just feeding Lucky." Her mother's gaze shifted to the stray dog, and she sighed. "Sweetheart, you shouldn't be playing with strays. They could be sick." "But he's not sick, Mama. He's just hungry," Emma pleaded. Mrs. Thompson hesitated, but then gently took her daughter's hand. "Come on, it's getting late." Emma looked down at Lucky, who remained still. Watching her leave, she felt a lump in her throat. "I'll come back," she whispered before walking away. That night, Emma couldn't stop thinking about Lucky. Was he cold? Was he scared? She tossed and turned in bed, her mind filled with worry. Finally, she made up her mind. The next day after school, she sneaked some food into her backpack, leftover chicken from dinner, a slice of bread, and a small bottle of water. She rushed to the spot where she had met Lucky. To her relief, he was still there. The moment he saw her, his tail wagged weakly. "You waited for me," Emma said softly. She pulled out the food and placed it in front of him. Lucky ate hungrily, finishing every last crumb. Emma laughed. "You really like chicken, huh?" From that day on, Emma came to see Lucky every afternoon. She would bring him food, talk to him about her day, and sit beside him under the shade of the lamppost. Lucky would listen, his brown eyes never leaving her face. Though he never spoke a word, Emma felt that he understood everything. And every day, their bond grew stronger. Emma's bond with Lucky grew stronger with each passing day. Every afternoon, she rushed to the corner where he always waited for her, tail wagging, eyes bright with excitement. He was no longer just a stray dog, he was her best friend. But not everyone in town saw Lucky the way she did. At school, some of the older kids had started teasing her. They had seen her sitting with Lucky on the sidewalk, feeding him and brushing his fur. To them, it was strange. To Emma, it was the best part of her day. Emma and her dirty dog. Kevin, one of the older boys, sneered as she walked past them during recess. He probably sleeps in the trash, Jake added, laughing. Emma ignored them. She had learned that paying them no attention was the best way to make them stop. But some days, they didn't stop. One afternoon, Emma was walking home alone when she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Kevin and his friends had followed her. "Where's your little street rat today?" Kevin taunted. Emma clutched her backpack and kept walking, pretending she couldn't hear them. Maybe she finally got tired of feeding it. Jake laughed. Emma quickened her pace, but the boys caught up with her. Kevin grabbed her backpack, yanking it hard. "Hey, we're talking to you." Emma stumbled, her heart pounding. "Leave me alone." Jake smirked. "Or what? Gonna call your little stray to save you?" They laughed, but their laughter was cut short by a deep, menacing growl. The boys froze. Emma turned, relief flooding her chest. Lucky stood a few feet away, his fur bristling, his teeth bared. His brown eyes were no longer warm and kind, they were sharp, locked onto the boys like a hunter watching its prey. Kevin took a step back. What the? Lucky barked. It was loud, commanding, filled with warning. Jake swallowed hard. "Let's go," he muttered, nudging Kevin. The boys turned and ran, their faces pale. Emma exhaled, her hands still shaking. "Lucky?" The dog's expression softened the moment the boys disappeared. He trotted up to her and licked her hand, his tail wagging slightly. Emma knelt and wrapped her arms around him. "You really are my guardian angel." After that day, Lucky never let Emma walk home alone. Every afternoon, after she said goodbye to him on the street corner, she would glance over her shoulder, and there he was, a few steps behind, his ears perked up, his eyes watching everything. He never got too close, never made a sound, but he was always there. And no one dared to bother Emma again. But the story doesn't end there. Not long after, something even more terrifying happened, an event that changed everything forever. If you've watched until now, leave a comment and let us know which country you're watching from. The air was damp and heavy as a fine drizzle fell over Willow Creek. The streetlights flickered to life, their yellow glow reflecting off the wet pavement. The town, usually lively at this hour, had fallen unusually quiet. Most people had hurried home to escape the cold rain, leaving the streets emptier than usual. Emma pulled her coat tighter around herself and adjusted her backpack as she stepped out of the school building. She had stayed late to finish her art project, completely losing track of time. Now, with the rain falling steadily and darkness creeping in, she regretted not leaving earlier. She glanced down the empty sidewalk, her stomach tightening slightly. She wasn't usually afraid of walking home alone, after all. She knew Lucky was never far behind. He always followed her from a distance, like a silent protector. But tonight felt different. Emma walked quickly, her shoes splashing in shallow puddles. The steady patter of rain filled the air. But beneath it, she thought she heard something else, footsteps. She slowed slightly, her pulse quickening. The footsteps slowed too. Emma's breath caught. She glanced over her shoulder. A man was walking a short distance behind her. His dark coat blended with the dimly lit street, and his hat cast a shadow over his face. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, his posture casual, too casual. Emma swallowed hard and quickened her pace. The man did the same. Her heart pounded. The rain suddenly felt colder against her skin. She turned onto a side street, hoping to lose him, but as soon as she did, she knew she had made a mistake. The road was nearly deserted. The rain had driven most people indoors, and the shops lining the street were already closed. There were no friendly faces, no bustling crowds, just the dim glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. And the man was still following her. Emma's breath came faster now. She wasn't sure what to do. She was still a few blocks from home, but she didn't want to run. What if that made him chase her? Then, suddenly, the footsteps stopped. For a brief moment, she dared to hope that he had turned away. Then, a strong hand grabbed her wrist. Emma let out a sharp scream, but the man clamped another hand over her mouth. "Shush," he whispered, his voice calm but cold. "No need to be scared." Emma struggled, trying to yank her arm free. But his grip was too strong. Her heart pounded wildly. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She kicked at him, but he barely flinched. "Just come quietly, and I won't hurt you," he murmured. Tears stung Emma's eyes. She needed to get away. She needed a deep, ferocious growl cut through the rain. The sound was so fierce, so menacing, that the man stiffened. His grip loosened just slightly. And then, out of the shadows, Lucky. He was soaked from the rain, his fur dripping wet, but his stance was firm. His lips curled back to reveal sharp, gleaming teeth. His brown eyes blazed with fury. The man muttered a curse under his breath. "Get lost, mutt." Lucky didn't move. He barked, loud and sharp. A warning that echoed through the empty street. The man hesitated. Emma took her chance. She bit down on his hand as hard as she could. "Ah!" he yelped, jerking his hand away. She stumbled backward, just as Lucky lunged. His teeth sank into the man's sleeve, snarling and tugging with all his strength. The man staggered back, trying to shake him off. "Damn dog," he spat, but Lucky refused to let go. Emma scrambled away, her heart racing. Lucky growled and pulled harder. The man lost his balance, slipping on the rain-slicked pavement and crashing onto his back. Lucky didn't stop. He barked furiously, snapping at the man's arm every time he tried to get up. Then, a door creaked open nearby. A woman from a nearby shop had heard the commotion and stepped outside, an umbrella in her hand. She gasped at the sight of Lucky attacking the man. "Hey, what's going on here?" Another voice called out from across the street. A man who had been locking up his cafe turned and saw the scene unfolding. Emma, still trembling, pointed at the man on the ground. "He tried to grab me." The woman's eyes widened. The man from the cafe wasted no time. He pulled out his phone and dialed the police. Realizing he was trapped, the stranger scrambled to his feet. He tried to bolt, but Lucky was faster. He lunged again, snapping at the man's leg. The man yelped and stumbled, giving the cafe owner enough time to block his path. A minute later, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The police arrived quickly, pulling the struggling man to his feet. "We've been looking for this guy," one of the officers muttered. "He's been lurking around town for weeks." Emma was still shaking as an officer knelt beside her. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" She nodded weakly, hugging Lucky. "He saved me." The officer glanced at Lucky, then smiled. "That's one brave dog you've got there." By the time they reached home, Emma was exhausted. Her parents had rushed to the police station as soon as they heard what happened. Her mother pulled her into a tight hug the moment she walked through the door. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I should have let you bring him home sooner." Emma sniffled. "He protected me, Mama. He always has." Her father crouched down, rubbing Lucky's head. "We owe you, buddy," he murmured. Lucky wagged his tail, but his eyes remained on Emma, as if making sure she was truly safe. Then, for the first time, Mrs. Thompson knelt beside him. "You don't have to sleep outside anymore," she said softly. Emma's breath caught. "Really?" Her mother smiled through her tears. "Really?" Emma let out a small, joyful sob and hugged Lucky tightly. He licked her cheek, his tail wagging harder than ever. That night, Lucky didn't curl up in the cold alleyway. He slept by Emma's bed. Warm, safe, and finally home.
What do you think about today's story? Do you believe situations like this can happen in real life? If you have any thoughts or feedback, feel free to leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any exciting stories. See you in the next video.